How difficult would it be for him to even try to escape?
Well, no one has so far since 1994 when they opened. But in El Chapo type of confinement at the supermax, he will be in his cell about 23 hours a day.
July 17th, 2019. Joaquin El Chapo Guzman was sentenced to life in prison plus 30 years to be served at the most brutal prison in America, the ADX Florence. The supermax prison houses some of the most ruthless criminals on the planet, and now it's El Chapo's new home. But how horrible is the ADX Florence? This is a full documentary on why the ADX Florence is called a cleaner version of hell.
The supermax is a life after death. It adds punishment to the crime.
July 20th, 2019. El Chapo was officially locked up at the ADX Florence in the United States. However, 6,756 days before this, he did something that made him a wanted man in almost every country.
Escape means overcoming layer after layer of impenetrable walls and an army of guards that outnumber the inmates almost 2 to 1.
His first prison escape sounds like a scene from a fictional movie, but when it comes to El Chapo, anything's possible. January 19th, 2001. El Chapo escaped to one of the most secure prisons in Mexico. The crazy part is he did it with the help of prison guards and workers. One of the guards was named Francisco El Chito Camberos Rivera. El Chapo had his prison escape all planned out. He greased a lot of palms to get everything arranged, and when the hour came for him to leave prison, El Chito electronically opened his cell door, concealed him in a laundry cart filled with dirty clothes, and began wheeling El Chapo through different doors and out of the cell. And remember, this was a maximum security prison and not a 100-meter corridor, so wheeling El Chapo through many security checkpoints was obviously scary, even for a man like El Chapo. And to put into context how scary things got, at one point, El Chito was trying to convince a security guard to allow him through a gate, but in the process, the laundry cart started rolling back. El Chapo got terrified that the cart would spill over and he'd be sent right back to prison. But Mother Nature was on his side that day because the cart stopped and El Chito was able to wheel him all the way out into the parking lot, where he was then transported into another car and out of the area. El Chapo's first prison escape solidified him as one of the most dangerous men in the world. It was at this point that the US wanted him extradited, but El Chapo knew that if he was extradited to the US, there was no way he was ever making it out. It would be goodbye to his cartel, his narcotics organization, and even his family. He obviously didn't want any of these, so he went into hiding. However, once again, he made history in one of the most spectacular ways possible. The beginning of the end.
This is the moment Joaquin El Chapo Guzman makes the Mexican government look ridiculous.
Yeah, that's right. El Chapo made the Mexican government look stupid with his ridiculously amazing prison escape back in 2015. Like if El Chapo's life was a movie, it would definitely have an Oscar. From 2014, when the Mexican government stormed in his home and arrested him, to 2015, when he escaped prison for the second time through a tunnel dug beneath his prison cell, El Chapo once again outsmarted everyone and proved that there are only a few things money can't buy. And as of now, one of those few things is freedom out of the toughest American prison, the ADX Florence. Just like I said at the beginning, El Chapo's serving a life sentence, but the question that's on everyone's mind is, can El Chapo escape from this prison? Well, as much as there's still a possibility for that, let us tell you why we and so many federal agents believe that's impossible for him to do so.
Be able to go outside without being handcuffed and restrained every day, I think that would be very good for me.
October 22nd, 1983, Thomas Silverstein and Clayton Fountain, members of the Aryan Brotherhood, fatally stabbed correctional officers Merle Klutz and Robert Hoffman at the U.S. Penitentiary in Marion. In the first case, the inmate was walking down the hall with his hands cuffed in front of him. Then, in what seemed like a scene out of a Matrix movie, he was able to suddenly turn and shove his cuffed hands into the cell of a friend, who quickly unlocked the cuffs with a stolen key, handed his friend a knife, and the inmate turned around and killed the guard. A few hours later, something similar happened with another inmate using the same tactic. The United States Penitentiary in Marion used to be the go-to center for the worst criminals in the U.S. But when this incident happened, it became clear that even among the most dangerous criminals, a few were worse than the rest, and these guys needed a more secure prison facility. And just like that, the idea for the ADX Florence was proposed. The sole idea behind creating the ADX Florence was to build a prison facility for prisoners with no regard for human life. Then the US government splashed a whopping $60 million, if not more, to get the all high-tech facilities in place. And on January 10, 1995, ADX Florence opened its doors for the first time. Now, let's narrow the story down to how bad the living conditions at the ADX Florence really are, and how criminals like El Chapo are actually suffering.
How do you see your life playing out then here as you age?
I'll just grow old and eventually I'll die.
Hell.
This isn't a prison that the inmates run. We run this prison.
The ADX Florence is a 37-acre complex in Florence, Colorado, USA. It's part of the Federal Correctional Complex, Florence, also known as the FCC Florence, which has 3 correctional facilities, each with a different security rating. Now, the majority of the facility is above ground, and the facility is designed to house a maximum of 460 inmates. But for some reason, it has never reached its full capacity. Ever. As of January 2023, the Supermax prison houses 326 inmates in 6 different units. Every inmate at the ADX has been sent there for demonstrating signs of being too dangerous in a normal prison. El Chapo, for instance, who has previously escaped 2 maximum security prisons in Mexico, can't be sent to any other normal prison. It'd be silly to do so. And just like El Chapo, these inmates are confined in a single-person cell for 23 hours a day. And when they're allowed to leave their cell, they're allowed into a slightly bigger cell for just an hour. It could be at 1 a.m., 4 p.m., or any time the correctional officers choose to let them out. The inmates have no idea what time it could be, because they obviously don't have a clock and their cells are built in a way that they can't even see the sky. Also, during their 1-hour free time, they're taken around in their handcuffs, shackles, or even both, depending on how dangerous the inmate is. For El Chapo, he's constantly in both, because they can't risk letting him out of their sight for even a second. Inmates are free to move around, exercise, or even meditate in an underground pit that looks like an empty pool. And yeah, the pool's bigger than their cell, but it's way smaller than you think. It's so small, inmates can only walk 10 steps in a straight line, or 31 steps in a circle. That should give you a clear picture of how tiny this so-called outdoor area is. Then, the longer an inmate stays and the longer they demonstrate good behavior, the more outdoor time they get. But if an inmate proves to be incorrigible, they may spend their entire prison sentence behind the steel doors of their cell. And when it comes to their food and diet, things just get worse. Food and food packs served to the inmates are restricted to ensure that they can't be used to harm themselves or a correctional officer, and also to ensure that their cells are kept hygienic. Inmates transferred from other facilities are allowed to eat in a shared dining room, but inmates as dangerous as El Chapo get their meals delivered by correctional officers. Then once El Chapo's done eating, his plastic food tray is inspected to make sure that he hasn't broken any part of it to use as a potential weapon.
Some people, man, who are just horrible spirits, people who just have no good in them whatsoever. So, they got places for people like that.
I guess ADX is one of them.
Each cell has a bed, a desk, and a stool, all constructed purely out of concrete. Then right beside the door is a toilet. This toilet's designed to flush itself once clogged, meaning there aren't any WC handles. El Chapo cell's one of the few that have a shower within it, and this shower is on a scheduled timer. There's also a little sink that works without a potentially dangerous tap. Some of these rooms have steel mirrors that have been bolted to the walls, and even some have TVs. El Chapo's cell in particular has a TV, but the programs shown are monitored. He's only allowed to watch recreational, educational, or religious shows. He's also handed some books and magazines if he wishes to read them, but we all highly doubt he's doing any reading in there. The next area is the wall of the cell. Unlike other prison facilities, The ADX Florence only has a 4-inch by 4-foot window. The windows are designed to restrict inmates from knowing their particular location in the prison complex. So for an inmate like El Chapo, it'll be almost impossible for him to escape, when he or the people on the outside don't even have a clue about his exact location within the prison. Now outside the cell walls are a multitude of motion detectors, cameras, and 1,400 remote-controlled steel doors. Correctional officers in the prison's control center monitor inmates 24 hours a day. There's also something known as a panic button, which is basically a single red button that once pushed, immediately closes every door in the facility. In addition to this, pressure pads and 12-foot razor wire fences surround the perimeter, which is patrolled by heavily armed officers. And finally, there are 12 different gun towers down the road leading to ADX Florence. I mean, at this point, the thought of escaping ADX Florence is terrifying. Like, how many men would El Chapo have to pay off? Or how many security guards would he bypass to exit the entire premises? But as terrifying as all that sounds, there are a few more things that make this place horrible.
We don't ask them to come here. With their misbehavior and management problems,
so they earn their way here.
ADX Florence houses inmates at 6 different security levels. One of these levels is called the General Population Unit, and under that unit is a cell block simply known as H. This is the unit where our dear old El Chapo's kept. His cell is continually paroled, and according to his lawyers, he doesn't get any sleep. That's why his wife went publicly to say this.
Entiendan y que pues apliquen los derechos humanos con él. No estamos pidiendo algo otra cosa, solamente que lo dejen descansar.
But as high-profile a criminal as El Chapo is, he's not the most dangerous criminal in ADX Florence. There's a unit known as Range 13. This is the unit for inmates who need the toughest control within the prison, and for inmates who are classified as ruthless killing animals. One of the inmates in Range 13 is Ramzi Yusuf. Pakistani-born Ramzi Yusuf was convicted in 1994 of terrorism conspiracy and other charges in connection with the 1993 World Trade Center bombing, which killed 6 people and injured more than 1,000. Yusuf was also convicted in 1996 of planning Project Bajinka, a foiled plot conceived by senior Al-Qaeda member Khalid Sheikh Mohammed to bomb 12 planes in a 48-hour period. El Chapo has done a lot of things, but some might argue that Ramzi's crimes truly earn him a spot in Range 13. Another inmate in this hell of a unit is Thomas Silverstein, one of the 2 men behind the Federal Bureau of Prisons' idea to build the ADX Florence. The loophole. Now there's one last thing you need to know, and that's the fact that in ADX Florence, there's a loophole for El Chapo to actually plan an escape. That loophole is for him to be on his best behavior, but there's more. There are 2 units within the ADX Florence that actually allows inmates to walk freely and interact with other inmates in their range. This unit, however, is only open to inmates who have demonstrated good behavior over a certain period. And if they continue to display this good behavior, then they might even be transferred out of ADX Florence as a whole. So if El Chapo somehow manages to make it out in a lesser prison, then he might be able to pull off one of his classical prison escapes. Another way is by exploiting the law and criticisms about the mental health issues ADX Florence causes.
Lost his trial, he lost on appeal, but this is a mechanism for him to say, despite all of that, I'm still entitled to a reversal of my conviction and a new trial because my constitutional rights were violated.
Despite the strict measures put in place so far to keep anyone from getting out of ADX Florence, there have been different murders within the facility. April 21, 2005, 2 inmates, Sylvester Rivera and Richard Santiago, were caught on tape, brutally beating and stomping high-profile Mexican mafioso Manuel Torres within the prison facility. Manuel Torres' body was eventually found dead on the premises. Just imagine criminals at the ADX Florence still committing murder. The next level for him was to be placed on death row, but for some unknown reason, they remained incarcerated at ADX. Apart from that incident, there have been a total of 8 suicides in this facility. This solely rests on the fact that conditions at ADX Florence are too harsh on these inmates. I mean, They're criminals, but they're still humans, right? And besides, there are few inmates who haven't committed crimes as brutal as El Chapo or Ramzi Youssef. Also, in 2012, 11 inmates filed a federal class action suit against the Bureau of Prisons. The suit alleged chronic abuse and failure to properly diagnose prisoners who are seriously mentally ill. At the time of the lawsuit, only 6 inmates had allegedly died by suicide. And what really opened up this loophole is the fact that in 2020, a British magistrate refused to extradite Julian Assange, the founder of the nonprofit organization WikiLeaks, to the United States. This was because the magistrate felt he would be subjected to solitary confinement and special administrative measures at ADX. And luckily for Assange, the United States and the High Court of Justice for England agreed to extradite him on the premise that he wouldn't be subjected to special administrative measures or imprisoned at ADX. Now, El Chapo is pushing for a retrial of his case. It's a pretty smart move, and we'd really love to see how it plays out for him. But at the end of the day, critics forget the fact that these inmates weren't forced to be in ADX. Their actions, one way or another, led them there. So do inmates like El Chapo really deserve the treatment given to them at ADX? Or should the Federal Bureau of Prisons decrease the special solitary measures administered?
Basically just depersonalized me and made me into a thing, and then what happens is
you become an animal, or you become your own worst enemy.